The associations that are preferred out there, and their requirements are being put on documents that are government aligned. I'm not really sure why PCRA is quiet about that. We see documents having written, a sample Wits University documents was written that you must be a member of SASA. Where does an association has to do with?
I'd like to indicate the issue of the legal fight that we have put, that we are fighting with the bargaining council. It's a very serious matter that is there, winnable, and we think that is going to be a historic victory for us, and that would change the status quo.
So I think there's another problem where we find that there are companies where they will do undercutting, and the sad part is that they will thrive and continue working and not comply.
The leadership that is here, the leadership of SIRA, the leadership of SASITA, the employers that have joined us online, and the employers that have acceded to the invitation of what we deem as the most important session that I think is long overdue as Tapsosa that we need to speak about. You'll bear with me, Zikokeza, I'm going to take about 45 minutes. I'm going to take about 45 minutes as there's a lot of ground that we actually need to cover, and there's a lot of issues that we actually need to talk about. First, I need to thank the program director, valued employers, and our esteemed guests. It is an honor on behalf of the National Executive Committee to present to you the purpose of our engagement today. This is with the objective on collectively resolving on the trajectory and posture of this industry that is inundated by so many challenges that seek collective solutions. And it is this reason, amongst others, that Tapsosa extended this invitation to all employers. And before we delve into the issues, we thought it was important that we remind each other on where we began as an industry and where subsequently we find ourselves in a state where this industry is plunging into disarray. In the first decade after the democratic dispensation, the industry at that time employed 55,000 employees. It was heavily monopolized. It was plagued by subjective regulatory oversight, and at the time, the institution that was there was SOB. I'm glad that the leadership of SIRA is here, because at that time, there was conflicting interests that were governing each other, just like what is actually happening now. And subsequently, that type of structure was disbanded after revolt by industry stakeholders, leading to establishment of SIRA. This decade also presented opportunities for the establishment of businesses, taking advantage of procurement practices, black economic empowerment, and that focused on empowerment and equal opportunities. A decade after that, this industry realized an exponential increase, an upsurge of 43% of companies that became a threat on dismantling this monopoly that currently exists in this industry. This upsurge and threat led to the engineering of unscrupulous practices and institutions that created strategic barriers to equal opportunities. Security companies that benefited prior to the 1994 era found ways to manipulate found ways to manipulate the empowerment system. They found ways to continue to benefit through fronting. They found ways to provide funding to newly created small BE companies with the objective of absorbing them into their organization when these small companies were not able to repay the funding provided. Majority holding structures that portrayed BEE were also created with behind-the-scene legal agreements that management control still lies in the hands of bigger companies. Majority foreign-owned entities did not always comply with regulations and legislative requirements. And through the empowerment program, brought in key influential and local influential people into their structures that can influence business opportunities in this country. It is in the same decade that the institutions negotiated in bargaining forums at the time that were meant to improve the lives of workers were manipulated and used to perpetuate monopoly and further exacerbate barriers to access to opportunities and target those who were regarded as a threat as they infiltrated the market. So in this particular decade, it is not surprising at all that due to a number of factors, including low barrier to entry, and to a certain extent, the prevailing conditions of this country in which we are finding ourselves, that this industry has deteriorated to a state of despair. The market is oversaturated. There is disparity of pricing of services threatening companies' sustainability. And it also impacts on their statutory obligations as well. There is an upsurge of fly-by-night companies with undercutting of pricing and exploitation practices. There are criminal syndicates that have systematically infiltrated this industry. There are additional regulatory structures that are being used to stifle the market and stifle competition, and they have become an additional burden to all employers that are actually sitting here. There is consistent ambiguity on regulatory oversight, in which we are glad that the leadership of CIRA is amongst here today. And perhaps when we start engaging in the plenary session, we can be able to look deeper into this issue. There is also influencing and manipulation of tenders. There is victimization of companies, in particular by government and state-owned entities. There is an increase on unfair tender requirements. There is non-payment or late payment of invoices. This industry has become a procurer's market. The influence and manipulation has focused on the following. Number one, the registration of the bargaining council, the letter of good standing with affinity or institutions approved by the bargaining council, the letter of good standing with the PSSPF, 5 million bank guarantee letters that are required on tenders. Can you just imagine what that does to a small business? The ISO certification that is required, companies that need to have 5 years experience, companies that are required to submit drone certification on submission of tenders, requirements of accreditation by employers such as Saliza and the others that we just mentioned right now, in which Sasita had made that application. The disparity in pricing, as alluded to in the previous slide, and the lowest bidder principle in government procurement, where contracts are awarded to suppliers who offer the lowest price amongst qualified bidders, has had a significant impact in this industry. This is also exacerbated by non-uniformity on bid requirements by various government departments. Some companies also tend to engage in suicide bidding, submitting bids so low that over time they are unable to deliver, and at times resulting to non-compliance as they are unable to meet their statutory obligations. As this industry realizes growth with close to 1 million workforce, It is concerning that as we compete amongst each other and strive to survive and try to survive in this cutthroat industry, that some amongst us are used by the captains of this industry to sabotage each other. That some among others are used to further contribute to fragmentation. That some amongst each other, there is elements of mistrust that plays right into the hands of those who retain monopoly. What is most disheartening is workers that are always at the receiving end, being let down by those who claim to represent their interests, as they are motivated by their own self-serving interests and used to target most marginalized employers under the guise of fighting and eradicating non-compliance in the interest of workers. The truth is that this industry is plunging into disarray and it is losing credibility and professionalism. Our core as being the Association of the Private Security Owners of South Africa is to realize tangible transformation. In the industry that is heavily fragmented and monopolized, at the expense of those in the majority that is operating in it. And hence we are relentless in advancing for fairness, for equality, by promoting and advancing and defending their socio-economic interests to attain a conducive and operational environment for all employers that are operating in this industry. Hence our objective is to have influence on policy, on strategic and operational issues of this industry. As we advocate for freedom of association and choice to remain competitive by rejecting any formations and institutions that seek to control and benefit the few, our fragmentation has made us very susceptible to constant targeting, to gross marginalization, to abuse of power by institutions that are meant to safeguard the interest of this industry, including those in the position of authority where we render services to. This is why we are determined that we are going to challenge and expose such, including the increased influence and unfair tender requirements that are meant to be a barrier in leveling the playing field. So why as an association are we advocating? Can I perhaps maybe excuse me just a little bit? Are you following the slides, or am I behind, or am I forward with regards to the slides that I have? Am I? Okay, good. So why as an association are you advocating for the issues as alluded to in our previous two slides? It is because of the relentless challenges that we are facing, and they continue to manifest unabated. Our fragmentation and disunity has led us not to come together to fight this manipulation and monopoly, resulting to the deployment of limited resources in our own corners and sabotage of our consistent efforts. Hence this industry trajectory and most institutions that are supposedly there to better the industry are controlled and dictated by a few. How is it that we allow as an industry conflicting interests to regulate each other? The composition of the bargaining council, the composition of the private security sector provident fund is one of the case in point. Hence the selective exemptions on compliance requirements and subjective narrative on compliance by those serving in those institutions, and weaponize this to serve as a barrier to opportunities and misuse to manipulate tender outcomes. The control even exists in accreditation, and I'm glad that Sasita has actually clarified that issue, on firearm training and electronic monitoring devices, surveillance equipment, and other specialized devices, which is controlled by voluntary associations such as Tapsosa. But because they have been existing for a long time, They've managed to actually manipulate and entrench themselves into the system as if they are part of the regulation of this industry when they are independent bodies. This is why we feel as Tapsosa that there is a disjuncture on regulatory enforcement, as there is a deliberate encroachment of regulation by institutions and formations who go beyond their mandate. This is the reason why there is continuous deliberate targeting and victimization of some security companies that are regarded as threats and encroaching into others' market share. And some unions serving in various positions in these particular institutions use the employer data that they access in these institutions to create a list of employers that they want to publicly name and shame, even though these employers have not been found guilty by a credible institution, including their so-called arbitration system. As we are not dealing with the underlying core issues that results to non-compliance in this industry, and use compliance to weaponize instead of finding resolve, Tapsosa has been advocating for pricing in the industry to be regulated instead of being a guideline, because this has a significant impact for companies that cannot cross-subsidize their businesses. This has got a significant impact on companies that are small and emerging, that are struggling to compete against larger companies, and that cannot able to even tap on the market share that is existing. The price undercutting and unfair competition, exploitation as workers may be underpaid or informalized if we do not regulate pricing, as companies that can be able to cut corners, and most of all, being susceptible to procurement irregularities, corruption or favoritism, which easily and it has crept into procurement decisions as price benchmarks are not clear in this industry. We have allowed non-standardized requirements by suppliers on the procurement of private security services. We have allowed non-standardized requirements by suppliers on procurement of private security services, both in the private and in the public sector, resulting to negative consequences affecting fairness, barrier to entry for smaller suppliers, compliance, efficiency, quality, and erosion of trust, mostly in our public procurement system. As a result, this industry has become very susceptible to corruption and manipulation, predominantly in government institutions, eroding the professionalism of this industry and opening a floodgate of organized crime syndicates and forums that are very chaotic, resulting and resorting into criminal acts and violence. These rogue elements further exacerbate the perception comparing this industry to the taxi industry by those who do not understand its dynamics and the challenges. As an association, as an employer organization, our position has no ambiguity. There is this fallacy or narrative that exists in this industry that seek to suggest and seek to undermine our efforts that we exist to have a non-compliance in this industry. On the contrary, our advocacy is demanding an inclusive bargaining mechanism in this industry that is devoid of conflicting interests. We advocate for greater representation and equity, increased compliance and standardization, policy alignment, protection against exploitation, and improved wages and working conditions for our workforce. Our position has no ambiguity, is that institutions entrusted with the authority of regulating this industry should not be weaponized to stifle competition. There should be no infringement right to trade and right to freedom of association, mandatory compliance on procurement practices or requirements in this industry, other than business compliance, should be SIRA, the regulator. As contained in terms of Section 35P of the SIRA Act. Others become applicable when a contract is awarded and there is penalties imposed on non-compliance. The pricing guidelines should be enacted into law as minimum set pricing standards so that companies cannot charge below these particular standards that will be set. There had to be standardization on the procurement of private security services, as I had alluded to earlier. And at some point when I'm going to elaborate on this issue further in terms of the meeting and the advances that were made by the Bargaining Council, we actually made a call to the Bargaining Council CEO to stay away from tender processes, as the role of the Bargaining Council is to only deal with employers and employees, and that is it. The employer and employer relationship only arises when the business has acquired work and employs employees to provide services to the client. And then the employer gets paid as per the contractual arrangement and then expected to pay employee salaries, not before that. There should be no parameters. There should be parameters on institutions responsible for industry regulation. There should be uniformity on the application of industry regulation. All companies should be treated as equal. Standardize all training accreditation not to favor independent bodies and monopolize the space. Strengthen platforms to participate and engage on the determination of policies and legislation framework. There should be a creation of industry, and we are advocating, I'm glad that the CFOs of SIRA is here. We are advocating that SIRA should establish a guarantee fund. This guarantee fund will be there to protect employers against financial risk and liabilities, including compliance and labor obligations that they need to fulfill. And most of all, as we represent most marginalized companies, that it will enhance credibility of smaller players who might lack balance sheet strength to secure larger contracts. We need to have a central and coordinated voice of industry activities that we believe that it needs to be spearheaded independently by SIRA, that will be inclusive of all industry stakeholders. So what are we doing as an association? I'm going to take a bit of time on the slide, leadership, because for me, I think it is important. The first court application, we decided that we are going to challenge the Bargaining Council and the Minister. And the first court application was in 2020, where Tapsosa lodged a court challenge at the Labour Court against the Minister of Labour for, amongst others, the unlawful extension of the Bargaining Council Levies Agreement and the main collective agreement to 9 parties, and followed by another application in 2022 on similar issues. This challenge is still pending. In 2024, we launched another review application that was inclusive of the above requirements, including asking the court to strike down Section 32.2 and Section 32.3 of the LRA as unconstitutional, with both the review applications that I've just alluded to. There has been deliberate sabotage by various establishments and formations to prolong these court processes and challenges from finding its day in court. This is with the intent to drain our resources and divide those who came together as a collective to support this cause, as they started losing faith that we will never see our day in court, to have our strong arguments heard. So, with our resolve on not retracting or backing down, no matter how much they can frustrate the process, we are well underway, and I am announcing it today, and to those that are joining us online. We are well underway to have our 2024 review application heard in court in the next few months. We believe we have a strong case, and we are determined to win this case for every employer that is yearning for change and those that will come after us. With the mere, what else are we doing as an association? With the mere resources that we do have, we are challenging unfair tender requirements by private security consumers, by officially objecting, and some will take them on legally. We have succeeded with some government departments and state-owned entities, while some have stuck to their guns, and some citing that they are waiting for the outcome of the review application to make their determination. We are also confronting head-on the deliberate victimization of companies in favors of others. The modus operandi is to block their vendor numbers, is to withhold their payments, is to blacklist them from doing business. State-owned entities have been captured, and this is the reason why we keep on exposing these shenanigans without favor and without any ambiguity. Our relentless expose on ESCOM is one case in point, as their deliberate sabotage of some companies rendering services to the power utility has had a severe impact on their operational sustainability, as they are collectively owed close to a billion rand by this utility. Transnet and other government departments, including municipalities, are also the same. Most businesses have gone under because of not being paid. With also the limited resources that we do have, we have engaged provincial governments with relevant institutions on industry compliance, late or non-payment of invoices, regulation and procurement practices. Some governments, such as the Western Cape government, and some departments, such as the National Health Department, have welcomed our submission, but our success lies in winning our court case. Our continued engagement also included the National Treasury, the Office of the Chief Procurement Officer, to question its mandate on its policies, on enforcement, on oversight, on compliance, and the department's procurement practices, as we believe that the National Treasury must play a central oversight and regulatory role in public procurement, aiming to ensure that government procurement is fair, it is equitable, it is transparent, it is competitive, and it is also cost-effective in line with Section 217 of the Constitution. Our last engagement with the National Treasury did not even end well, which included SIR, that was part of that meeting. We collectively raised issues on unfair tender requirements and non-standardization of procurement requirements by the organs of state. We have subsequently, in this regard, requested for another engagement, as there were undertakings that were made in that meeting that are yet to materialize. Our view is that the National Treasury is failing us by not properly monitoring procurement compliance by departments, municipalities, and public entities, and conducting audits and evaluations and investigations where irregularities are suspected. We also took a concerted effort with other fragmented organized labor on the approach on compliance enforcement, given the current modus operandi by those who are captured and having self-serving interests to selectively name and shame security companies of not being compliant, and marching to government departments calling for the termination of their services, without recognizing the ramifications of their actions on the employer and the employees that they proclaim to be serving their interests. Our engagement with those unions was to come together as employers and organized labor to jointly collaborate and approach problematic organs of states who directly contribute towards non-compliance in the industry and force them to do right by the service providers. And these employees, as their actions, has got a rippling effect on the entire value chain. Although from time to time we raise our concerns with CIRA on industry issues, in particular our stance on overlapping of regulation and unfair tender requirements, we must commend CIRA with this effort for inclusive engagements. It was long overdue leadership. Because as Tapsosa, we have been knocking on your doors, although you've got an open door policy, so that we can be able to align when it comes to issues and problematic areas that are facing this industry. So the inclusive engagement with stakeholders on industry regulation efforts, inspectorate capacity and intervention on enforcing compliance. There is a formulation of a joint steering committee that has taken place where we discuss the aforementioned issues as alluded to earlier, with the plans of bringing all parties together and facilitate robust engagement in tackling industry issues, which is long overdue and welcome. We are hoping that that engagement that is coming, where you're going to be putting the industry stakeholders together in one room to have a robust engagement, we are hoping that it will lead to positive results, as we all fight in our own corners and there is no unity. We also noted that as an association that when there are discussions on joint crime efforts with the police, only a handful of companies are participating in the ears and eyes E2 structure. Hence our approach and subsequent engagement with the police for inclusive participation as the association member companies in such initiatives. We have further extended our request for participation on various business chambers as businesses fund private security in various regions to fund business and critical infrastructure. One case in point of flagship project that we would like to get involved in is called an Adapt a Staff Substation program. We have also entered into a partnership with SACITA on tailored skills development programs for Tapsosa members to significantly contribute to uplifting the industry standards, address skills shortages, promote industry competitiveness and inclusivity. Our collaboration, amongst others, will be also to focus on programs that include entrepreneurship and cooperative training that will enable individuals and companies to start and sustain their businesses, which contributes to job creation and economic growth. Through the facilitation by one of the former representatives of organized labor with more seats in the bargaining council, we had an engagement 2 months back with the bargaining council where there was an expressed view by the council that Tapsosa should form part of the bargaining council. Whatever motive is or was behind this particular approach, there are certain principles as an organization we should not derail from. Hence the inclusion of a plenary engagement after this presentation to allow for robust engagement and resolutions on such advancements and developments. As an organization, we will not relent on exposing, on public exposés, on industry challenges, on injustices, on shenanigans that are happening, as we demand accountability, we demand transparency by those entrusted with those responsibilities. We will not relent in exposing the truth without fear or favor in our quest to fight for fairness and leveling the playing field. I, as a mouthpiece of Tapsosa, have received numerous threats and death threats by those that we have exposed and by those that do not want to see change happening in this industry. And we're still going to expose them because they are marginalized companies who end up losing everything they work hard for and going under without any recourse. I'm about to finish leadership. Besides the interventions from an industry perspective, as alluded to in this presentation, we noted that whilst we fight these lingering issues, there's a need to bring intrinsic value to private security businesses and employees in assisting with their pain points on operational, financial challenges, and business sustainability in this cutthroat industry, hence our collaboration with ABSA. Our collaboration includes tailored enterprise and supplier development support programs for the industry and the assistance for businesses to help them to become financially viable and sustainable when doing business. The intervention is at various levels of businesses and has been categorized into 3 spheres. Micro enterprises, new entrants with an annual turnover of 200,000 to 6 million. Small businesses with an annual turnover of 6 to 17 million. Medium-sized enterprises with an annual turnover of 17 to 150 million. And large enterprises with an annual turnover of 200 million and above. The intervention includes business development support, such as business coaching, advisory, and mentoring services based on the size of the business. Business support, in particular, for new entrants and small businesses that will include compliance on business and from an industry perspective. We've also negotiated tailored fund finance for the industry on negotiated interest, funding companies' operational requirements, wages and other costs, negotiated on discounts on vehicles, on bulk buying, on equipment, fuel and uniforms, and this also includes negotiated advance funding on delayed payments. Of importance is the exposure that will be derived from this initiative and network on market access that will be availed through this collaboration and other network supplier development and support programs. So those that are looking at scaling their businesses and diversifying, we are looking at collaborative and structured supply chain initiatives on technology and systems to bring to the market whilst maintaining exclusivity and a competitive edge. We are also excited on the venture capital funding secured for established businesses looking at expansion, diversification even beyond the borders of this country. Availed funding for joint ventures and consortiums on industry innovative solutions, so that we are able to live up to what we are actually talking about. In partnership with SASITA, we have capacitated our organization because we know that we do not have sufficient resources in meeting our obligations. So we have partnered with SASITA in terms of them granting an internship program for the Tapsosa to see through our interventions, to roll out the enterprise support programs, where, as I have indicated, and it has afforded us to have decentralized member support desks in various provinces with designated member service agents that will support employers on the following. 1, tender support services on your queries, on your objections, on your requirements and monitoring thereof. Member subscriptions in terms of billing, reminders, renewals and updates. Member updates on dissemination of industry information, updates on organizational activities, and member engagement sessions such as this one. And also, render enough support for those employers, as I had indicated on the collaboration that we are having with the financial institution, to render support on empowering and enterprise development initiatives. Take you through the whole entire process. Work with you so that you are able to actually attain those benefits that we just alluded to before. And also funded skills programs, coordination and support on collaborative initiatives with ASA. So the participation by security business on this enterprise development and support initiatives will be availed in the last quarter of this year, and the process will be communicated accordingly. So if a member of Tapsosa kindly note that the subscription fee should be paid as a once-off at the commencement of the financial year to enable proper budgeting. We ask for loyalty and the need for unity, and request that maintenance or payment of subscription fees be made on time, and further request contribution to the legal work and other organizational activities which are important. We wish to express our sincere gratitude to all those members that came forth and acceded to our call for contribution towards the legal fees. Hence, we have managed to get to the advanced stage in our review application, as alluded to earlier. All the benefits in terms of the Tapsosa constitutions are based on the payment of subscription fee and adherence to the constitution of the organization, and the decision of the highest structure is important. In closing, and in anticipation of the robust engagement that we'll have after this presentation, we thought we should set the tone of this engagement by closing off with questions probing our way forward as a collective, whether we're a member of Tapsosa or not. What is our collective as employers? What is our collective resolve and intervention to protect the integrity of this industry, given the deteriorating state of this industry? How do we collectively advance and defend the interest of this industry from manipulation, from victimization and division? How do we uphold those procuring private security services accountable? How do we hold those regulating the industry accountable? And lastly, we have our valued member that normally scribes and advises the association with a number of pointers. And I took the liberty to actually extrapolate what he had said. Our industry continues to be marginalized with inconsistent policies, poor enforcement, and institutional indifference, which threatens its social and economic contribution, as alluded to by one of our valued members. So where to from here? Our call for this engagement is to resolve on where to from here, given the prevailing dynamics of this industry. In advance, we wish to thank you for your time and contribution, and please, after the lunch, we would love you to stay. Let's have a robust engagement. Let's resolve. Let's take the issues forward. If it means we need to be able to pull up our socks and do something, let's do that as employers. Because this industry has a future. And the future is everybody that is sitting here and that is servicing it. Thank you.